Here we go. We are alive. Hello,
Okay, we're
everyone.
alive.
David is a stand-up comedian. He is also a counselor for people with mental health, and he also teaches them comedy, which is fascinating. And I want to talk with you
Great.
and know more about it. So thank you for being here.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So for how long, since when did you start doing comedy, or how did you get into comedy?
Well, I've been doing comedy for about 20 years. And I got into it. So let me take you back a little bit.
Wow.
So I have depression. Oh, I have bipolar actually, and mostly depression though. And when I got on medication finally, I started to feel really good. And I thought, you know something, I think I want to try stand-up comedy. So I was working at the Vancouver Crisis Center at that point. I was a trainer there. And I kept on running my jokes by the volunteers that I was training. Of course, they thought I was hilarious because they had no choice. So I went down, I put a 5-minute act together and I went down to a club called Punchlines. And it was like a big club. It sat like 200-300 people. And on this night, there were maybe 25 people there. So it was like a big empty cavern. So they put me first and I got up. I didn't get a single laugh. It was like 5 minutes of dead silence. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm not doing this again. And then I took a course in stand-up comedy. And the next time I got up, I was prepared. The place was packed with all our friends and supporters, and it was amazing. And I just knew that I had to do stand-up comedy.
Wow, is that club still open? The one?
No, they closed. They closed a long time ago, unfortunately.
Oh, that. And how do you get better with comedy during this 20 years?
Well, I guess I try and do as many shows as I can. And I'm always writing material. Some of it works, a lot of it doesn't. A lot of trial and error. A lot of it's a lot of work to write good comedy material, and so that's how I try and get better. Oh, and I also watch comics on YouTube and stuff like that.
That's good. And during this 20 years, you have built some materials and you save them in file or in your laptop.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you use specific app or which app?
I just use Word.
Word. Okay.
Microsoft Word. Yeah.
And then all the 20 years jokes are saved there with you.
Yeah.
Do you have some jokes where you like in a way lost them?
Well, I'm pretty good about keeping them. I've got like a file, like a Word file. It's like 400 pages of jokes, and even the jokes that aren't funny, I keep around because I've been working on this joke on and off for like 15 years, and I finally, in the past couple of weeks, I finally got it, and now it's finally funny. But I tried it a whole bunch of different times over that time period, and it just wasn't working. So yeah, so that's kind of how I do things.
Wow, it's really crazy how jokes like makes you feel like they have spirit, like it's just we don't see them.
Yeah. Well, what I find is that also that let's say I have a joke that I've done a whole lot, and I've done it so many times I don't think it's funny anymore, and then I do it in front of an audience that hasn't heard it, and they laugh, and all of a sudden the joke comes alive again.
Sometimes I keep thinking like, because what makes the jokes good, what improve you is the laugh. It's like there is some connection between the laugh and all the work we do. And
yes, absolutely.
I find an easy way for me to develop my jokes and to be confident. So I have one fan, her name is oh my God, how she will be sad if she knows that I forget. That's horrible.
Hopefully she's not watching this podcast.
Okay. Anyway, so I meet her almost every Sunday. and she would laugh for anything I do,
Mm,
anything I say. She is like, she just wanna laugh. So
hmm.
all my new materials, I start telling her, and I start building the confidence from there, and then I would say it in front of other audience. And
Hmm.
I already like, she laughed for it, so I have more confidence in it. But sometimes
Hmm.
if I go with this new audience with new materials, they will make me hate my new materials.
Yeah.
And I try to go from there, and then I see most jokes. It's a good way for me just to start from someone who would laugh, who would makes me happy about what I'm
Yeah.
saying. And then you go slowly, slowly.
Yeah.
How do you feel about working with other comedians? Does it like help you? Does it give you too many punchlines when you work with
Oh,
other
you mean like to workshop jokes and stuff like
and
that?
suggestions from other people?
Yeah, that's great. It's like the open mic where I met you. I go there. I try and go there a couple times a month, and I find it's really helpful both in terms of people giving me ideas, but also I find I really benefit from giving other people ideas because it's a great exercise to use my brain. So, someone else will be doing their material and I'll think of some punchlines, and that just keeps me, it's just like it's good practice.
That's good. And for example, what's your goals on comedy? Do you have goals? Do you set time? Do you have any target you want to do in specific time, or you just enjoy it?
Um, well, I've done a lot of shows. I guess most of my energy goes into stand up for mental health. And in stand up for mental health, so it breaks down two ways. So I do a lot of shows with the comics that I train. So I train comics both here in Vancouver, and I've run my program in over 50 cities in Canada, the US, and Australia in partnership with mental health organizations. So, for example, I just did a group in a place called Culpeper, Virginia, of all places. And what happens is that they recruit the comics, they promote and book a venue for the final show. And then I trained the comics virtually. This was over 12 weeks. And the plan was I was going to fly in and do a show with them. But because of COVID, we did the show virtually. And so I do a lot of those shows. Oh, hang on, just let me kill this just a sec. Okay, here we go. So I do a lot of shows with these comics. So that's part of where my comedy is channeled into because I MC the shows, but usually I get to do 20 or 30 minutes of comedy, interspersed with all the other ones. And then I do shows of my own where I perform at all sorts of different conferences and events, once again, all across North America and into Australia. And so I'm always developing material for those because there are certain groups that have me back like more than once. And so I need to constantly have new material.
That's good. And for sure, you have website.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Standupformentalhealth.com.
Nice. Okay, I will
Yeah.
even put it down. And people, do you try to market your website? Put it like, do you pay anything for marketing, or is it word to word? How do you get more known?
Couple ways. First of all, my website ranks really highly under the keywords comedy and mental health. And a lot of people find me that way because people actually look for those keywords. So I get a fair amount of people finding me that way. And then the rest of it is just word of mouth, people who have heard of me and they've passed my name along or they've taken the class and they've told someone else. And, sometimes I just got a gig in Texas, in Fort Worth, Texas. And I did this group like 10 years ago. And, usually sometimes I do the same group twice, but usually it's just a one-shot deal. But here they are 10 years later, and all of a sudden they decide to have me back. So it's really cool that way.
That's nice because the search engine Google
Yeah.
is the biggest in the world.
Yeah.
I feel like if you know how to get people attention
Yeah.
and how to just manipulate the search, it could make so much big difference
Yeah.
on how many people will find you.
Totally. And it's knowing which keywords. And when I've kind of been lucky because my site just because of the way I guess it's built has always ranked highly in those words. And now I kind of try and fit those words into a lot of the text on the site. And I didn't know initially what people would be looking for, but just over the years, I've realized, oh, okay, so this is how they find me. So I try and make sure, I mean, I'm not like a search engine optimization person, but I just try and, put as much text in that uses those words.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know. I want to also ask you this question. They even say that Google, it's just for us, it's a search engine, but Google, the business itself, it's made to even make us think different and direct us different, because when you search, what comes is based on them and based on what they will show
Yeah.
you and what comes first, next. And they even now saying that Google is also playing these games, uh,
Hmm.
that when people search, the results that come, they have strategy to shift people thinking and people believe. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I didn't know they did that. So yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, there is even with politics, like
Hmm.
if you search, if you write, for example, Donald Trump, the
Yeah.
result that will come, or if you just write name of another president, even the result that comes and shows are made based on studies and based on goals and plans for the company.
Huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have no idea.
yeah. Even there are too many people now. They are warning the world, and it's just crazy.
Hmm.
I also wanna ask you, like last time we were in the Zoom, in the mic, the feedback,
Yeah.
you said that you also think that maybe we will be living in the matrix like our kids. When I heard
Oh,
it, I felt like you were supporting the
oh,
idea.
was I don't remember saying that actually. That might have been someone else. Yeah, I
Okay.
don't remember saying the bit about the Matrix. I don't, I mean, I watched the Matrix years ago, but I can't even remember it now.
But what do you think that in couple years, or our kids or kids might be not even like living how we live now?
It's kind of a I think it's already happening because I think that some kids spend a lot of time online and all their friends are online and all their social activities are online and they don't I mean I'm not an expert in that, but I think it's a concern that people do everything virtually and forget how to interact with the world. I mean, what's changed too is that, so when I first started to work at the crisis center, back in, I started there as a volunteer in the late 80s, and then I was a trainer there for about 10 years from about, I don't know, 1990 to 1980, 1998 or something, 19, whatever. When I first started, everything was done by telephone, everything.
Mm.
Um, and now they have, chat and text. So people who are, suicidal, say, they can get in touch with the crisis center via text app. And it's probably a good thing because I think it helps them to reach a larger demographic, because I think there are people who are uncomfortable or afraid to talk on the phone. And this gives them more of a chance to talk. But yeah, it's a lot of it's done virtually now.
You know what's scary is if you see like the difference between the first iPhone and the iPhone now, just
Yeah.
in 10 years, in 15 years, and how many people, what, like when the first iPhone came, how many people needed it and used to use it, and now. So the scary thing is that these things are going so fast. And
Yes.
in 30 years, in 40 years, in 100 years, you don't know how fast these things will go and how they will manipulate us. Let us come back to comedy because I have to.
Okay, let's come back to comedy. All
Uh,
right.
what's the relation? Like, do you use comedy as therapy for people with mental health? Is it like people who is depressed, or how do
Yeah,
you?
so basically what sort of what happens is it's not a substitute for therapy, but it's very therapeutic because people come in and they tell their stories of what they've been through comedy. And a couple things happen when they do that. First of all, when you have mental illness, there's often a lot of shame that goes with it. People are embarrassed to admit that they have mental illness or that they had psychotic breaks or hallucinations or really bad depressions or they've tried to kill themselves. And here in the class, for example, so normally as a counselor, so someone tell me, oh, 5 years ago, I had a psychotic break and I took off all my clothes and I ran around the airport naked, which is actually what happened to one of our comics. And as a counselor, I'm trained to say, wow, that sounds really traumatic. Let's talk about your feelings. As a comic, I go, wow, that is hilarious. I can't wait to see that in your act. And so we turn it into comedy. And all of a sudden, all this stuff that people are ashamed of just becomes great comedy material. In counseling, we call that a cognitive shift. So it shifts the way it sits inside of you. And all of a sudden, people come to class and they're, oh, I can't wait to talk about this time I was hospitalized or, the 2 years I couldn't get out of bed or all of a sudden. So it's almost like they go from being ashamed of this stuff to being proud of it. And I think there's also something very therapeutic about so in a regular support group, you tell your story, people listen in silence and they're respectful. In Stand Up for Mental Health, you tell your story at a comedy club and people are laughing and applauding and telling you how great you are. And all of a sudden you start to think, something, I actually have something important to say. I'm not such a bad person after all. And so it's a very powerful experience to tell your story through comedy. And sometimes what I hear from some of the comics is they'll say, I've had 10 years of therapy and in 2 months, I've gotten more out of this class than I ever got from 10 years of therapy. So for some people, it really works miracles. Not for everyone, because it's not the sort of class like you have to want to take this class, as to do comedy. You can't just go to a group of people and say, okay, this week we're doing art therapy. Next week we're doing stand-up comedy. Because a lot of people would go, oh, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. But for the people who want to do it, it can be a really powerful experience.
What's crazy for me is that I keep finding new things about comedy. There are too many comics who I think they never heard about what you do because usually they say that most people are rude or living unsatisfaction life or unhappy because they are traumatized and they have things inside them that they cannot bring to the surface.
Exactly.
So to know that comedy helps these people to bring these things to the surface and live without it, and when you see these people laughing, even makes you feel good about it. It's I would say the most beautiful way to go over suffering. But as you mentioned, it's not for everyone. And why do you think it's not for everyone? What's some difficulties you face with some people?
Well, I think that to want to do comedy, I mean, comedy is a really scary thing to do, especially if you've never done it before. And I think that if you get sort of pushed into it, it could be really damaging if you're not ready to talk about yourself. Or like the comics in my class, I make sure they succeed. So we've tried all their material in front of the class. We've rehearsed it a whole bunch of times. The audience that's coming to see them is really supportive because they're an audience. They know what they're coming for. It's not just a regular comedy club audience that just happened to be there on a Saturday night. So I make sure that they succeed. Now, I think if someone took the class and they didn't want to do it and they were forced into it, I'd be really afraid of having them fail. And that's the last thing I want. That's the last thing I want to have happen to anyone.
Wow, you just makes me feel how great you are. It's nice because it's like you are their teacher, but you also care so much, and you get happy when you see your student succeed. And because I
Oh,
was
it's the best. It's the best feeling in the world. What I'm really good at is I'm really good at making people into stars. So I'm really good at taking people who know nothing about comedy and 3 months later getting them on stage and having them be really good. And I think that a lot of the people who take my class, they've been marginalized most of their lives because they haven't been able to function well in the world. And all of a sudden, here they are for the first time in their life, and they are stars. People want to hear what they have to say. And I think that's a really powerful experience. So I get a lot of satisfaction out of watching that process.
I feel like that's like fuel for you, for
It
happiness.
is. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Exactly. And I think like we are chemicals, and when you just find what makes your chemicals increase, the good chemicals increase, and you try to participate, that's really beautiful thing to do. So
I agree.
I'm really even glad that like there are people like you.
Thank you.
For your student, do you like recommend them maybe to smoke or drink or take some psychedelics, or do you use anything of these things like weed?
No, actually, kind of the ground rules is they can't come to class stoned, or drunk, or like on psychedelics. And when they do the shows, they can't be drunk or stoned or anything like that, because what I found is that it's really hard to do comedy and to memorize a 4-minute set. And if you're stoned or high on psychedelics, there's a real good chance you're going to screw it up. And so, and also it's, um, I mean, I know, there are people who, I mean, I don't have judgments around, whatever. I mean, I've smoked tons of pot in my life. I've done acid and cocaine. And I mean, I loved doing LSD when I was a lot younger. I mean, now it's just too much of it's too hard on the body. But I used to love those drugs. So I'm not like against people doing drugs. I just find that, people need to be sober in order to be in class and pay attention and help out other people, because it's a process too where, like the open mic that I met you, is people bring in jokes, they try them out, they help each other. And yeah, I just think so. If they want to go off and when they work on material, if they want to go off on their own and get drunk or stoned or whatever, great, I don't care. But in class you have to be sober.
I know this might be weird to say, but what if someone tells you that I cannot go in the stage and do comedy unless I'm high?
That's a good question. I think that, because of course I think that marijuana is, I mean, I know, obviously we all know they have medical marijuana for different things. And if someone said, I use medical marijuana and this is what I need to use to function, I'm fine with that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Especially me, like I came from Yemen, and
Yeah.
it's so valuable for me when you are not married to your idea, or you are not pushing something on me, because
Right.
I don't know how to call it, but we kind of have that feeling inside us, which is, I don't know even where this feeling come from, but when some people tells you what to do, it's not nice feeling. And that's my number one motivation why I want to be in Canada and in the US, because it's so hard, because also we don't know where we come from or why we are even here. So who are someone to tell you, no, this is not, or this is yes?
Yeah, and so here's kind of where I once again, if someone needs medical marijuana, great. And yeah, but I think that I think there's a difference between using medical marijuana and just getting stoned and partying. And I know for some people, like I'm thinking of one of our comics actually, who he had schizophrenia, and that made it really hard for him to get out of the house sometimes because of his paranoia and his delusions. Um, and so he smoked pot. He smoked a lot of pot, and that helped him. Like that cut down the, because he had really bad anxiety too, and that cut the anxiety so he could function. And I'm going, great. If that's what it takes, if that's what you do, and if that's what works for you, beautiful, do it. Yeah.
I don't know how to put it into words about how good I feel when I listen to people like you, because it's valuable for me. Coming from a place where you are told what to do, even if you don't feel good about it,
Mm-hmm.
and leaving there, then when you hear people are telling you, no, actually you can just do whatever you want, it's so valuable. I wanted to ask you, when comedians, for example, open up about their stories and their past, um, it's nice in comedy because you don't know what's true or what's lies,
Mm-hmm.
and comedians can exaggerate,
Absolutely.
and the people will never like tell the comedian, oh, you did this, so they will shame him for that.
No, no.
So it's a good way to bring out everything, because nobody knows what's really true or what's
Well,
not,
I
but they
think
are laughing.
Well, I think too, what I tell my comics is it's good to start from the truth, but then when you turn it into comedy, that's like you say, you got to exaggerate, because sometimes I'll have people bring in material and it's not funny and they'll go, well, but that's what happened. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happened, but that's not funny enough to make it as comedy. So here you are, you're talking about being hospitalized, say. Actually, the bit I'm writing about is a time that I was hospitalized. Um, and yeah, it starts from a true place, and it mentions some of the incidents that happened that were true, but the punchlines, obviously, they exaggerate and they go all over the place. So yeah, like I say, I think good comedy starts from a place of truth, and it's emotionally true. So what I mean is that when you're literally true, you say, well, this happened and then this happened, and then it's like you're making a documentary, and that's great, but that's not good for comedy. But I think it has to be emotionally true, in the sense of, you look at the comic talking about it and you go, yeah, that rings true to me, even though they're not telling you the exact literal truth. You can feel them and it feels authentic. Like I remember years ago, I saw this comic and she was gorgeous, like drop dead gorgeous blonde. And she was doing a piece, a bit about like her, being overweight and all that kind. And I thought, no, I don't buy this from you. I mean, you're gorgeous and you're gorgeous. That's not true for you. And I just don't buy that bit of comedy.
So what I understood from you is that funny materials should be about you, your dark things, and should start from true story, so you
Yeah,
can
I mean,
be in it.
that's what I like. And they don't necessarily have to be dark. I mean, some of my stuff is really dark, but some of it is just, stuff that happened when I was raising my kids, and, stuff, or stuff that I see out there in the world that I find, like I do a whole bit about, the ancient Egyptians, just because I think some of the stuff from that culture, the is just really funny and it makes me laugh, and I think it's a great thing. But and there are comics who don't do that, like Seinfeld. Like I mean, I know how good he is, but I'm not a big fan because I see his stuff and I have no idea who he is, because all his stuff is observational humor and it's really not about him at all. And yet, people love Seinfeld, and I mean, I know he's great, but for me, that's not the comedy that really resonates.
I really like, I feel like it should like be, for example, something dark about you, you make it funny, or something
Yeah,
that's funny for you and you really
yeah,
interested about it, so people can feel it. But what raised in my mind now is, doing comedy for therapy is very good for some people. Let's not say
yeah.
everyone. But there are too many people who still don't know. They don't have access to this kind of information.
Mhm.
Do you
Yeah.
try, how can you as individual, or how can like the group that's doing comedy as therapy give more people access, not sell for more people, just give them access to the information, which is maybe through the podcast. It's also one way where people can get access to this information. But how do you try to get more people access to this information?
Well, once again, it's a matter of I find it's word of mouth. People hear about it. People find me find me on the web. I do interviews like this. I do a lot of media interviews over the years. Also, I was my work was featured in a documentary here in Canada on the CBC that is a great documentary, and also a documentary in Australia. So people watch the documentaries and they find out.
Nice.
But a lot of people, to them, the idea is new. I remember actually, I met a couple years ago before COVID. I met Stephen Wright, who's that one-line comic who's amazing. I went to one of his shows, and the person I was with knew someone who knew him. And anyway, we went backstage and met him, and I told him about what I do, and he said, "Wow, I had no idea there was something like this out there." So yeah, a lot of people don't know, and it's in some ways, it's a matter over the years of getting a bigger platform. And I've got a reasonable platform, but I don't have the kind of huge reach that people who are famous do.
Because I'm trying also, because I also talk with people and they are like, wow, they are surprised when I tell them that in Yemen people don't know about comedy. Like
Mhm.
people just like, it's funny, like they haven't seen it. Like you are talking about aliens, even people haven't seen the aliens but heard about them. In Yemen they haven't heard it and they haven't seen it.
They
and
haven't heard about the aliens.
and they are, yeah. So what drives me crazy is that the more I know about comedy, how beautiful is it? It's one of the best communities in the world, I would say. And here you go, there are millions of people, nation, that don't know about it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and I agree. It's a great community. Like one of the things I mean, that's one of the things I like about the open mic where I met you. It's like, there are people from all over, all different ages. And I used to do another open mic. I stopped doing it because it was way too early in the morning. It was like 8 a.m. And that's just too early to try and be funny. But there were comics from Berlin and Romania and Czechoslovakia and Britain and Ireland and just everywhere. And there's, I think comedy is an international language because it's in English. I mean, I think, and all these people spoke English. I mean, they had accents, but whatever. Um, um, yeah, so it was really, um, it was just really neat to see. So there's this comedy community, and there's enough English speakers all across Europe and into Asia and stuff, because there's a whole comedy circuit in those countries. And the jokes you hear them make, I mean, you could have the same joke for an audience in Czechoslovakia, and you could do the same joke in Vancouver, and it would get a big laugh, just the same. So it's like it's an international language, I think.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And like in your courses, when you teach, do you feel, what's the difference between teaching online or when the people are around you physically?
Well, I think it's interesting because of COVID. So in Vancouver, we have classes that are 6 months long. So they're longer. The virtual classes I do are between 6 or 12 weeks. So like I say, the Vancouver classes are 6 months, and we started out virtually, and we do two shows, one after 3 months and one at the end, a grad show. And we started out virtually. And that was fine. And then we had to go into the classroom because people need to learn how to use the microphone and all this kind of stuff. And COVID had sort of lessened at that point. So we went into the classroom and they were thrilled to see each other in person.
Wow.
And I think too that what you get in person that you don't get virtually is that people get to socialize and get to know each other because, they hang out before class, they go, they talk on the breaks, so there's that social thing that you don't really get as much when you're online. So my preference is to do it live.
Yeah, just now why I start asking you, because my mom is the funniest person in the world. Like, she's the shit. She would make fun and kills you, like drop you to the floor. And she still doesn't know about comedy. That's why when I found comedy, I was like, comedy found me. I didn't found comedy. In a way, I'm like my mom, and we are the kind of person who, if you sit with us, we would just make you laugh. And everyone who is born in the US, like, they would motivate him, his friends, his family. They're like, oh, you are funny, go do comedy. But they don't know. And my mom, she had very hard, in a way, mind programming as growing up women in Yemen.
Yeah.
You don't that's what I'm telling you, that it's very valuable when you tell me, okay, if someone want to do it, they can do it, because it's not even healthy for the human brain. It get abused during the years and the years. And here you are, like, teaching people how to bring out of this thing something funny. And my mom is funny, so she could be Dave Chappelle, I think. Do you have something on that? Because I have another question.
No, keep going. Keep going.
When COVID hit, did you, and you start doing it online, did it like affect the connection between you and your student? Was it like, what was the advantage and disadvantage of it?
Well, of course, the advantage is you don't need to go anywhere. It's so easy. And the other advantage too is, for me as someone who teaches it, is that I can see everyone on the screen, whereas when I'm in the classroom and people they're sort of sitting in a U shape, sometimes I miss out on things. So in that sense, I kind of like that, being able to have that ability to see and facilitate everyone. And also, I think for people too, it's easier when they're on Zoom. It's easier. I don't know. I think it's easier to raise your hand and know everyone and see everyone and all that kind of stuff. I just, so that's really nice about virtual. And then of course, but you lose out on certain things too.
Yeah. It's especially comedy. Like, imagine, I never done comedy with physical audience. But two of my friends in my flat, they are like my audience. But hopefully in the future we will do more when I get to Canada. I want to also ask you, how long can you still be here? Just for me.
I thought you wanted to go for another 20 minutes, or
okay.
Do you? I've got another 20 minutes if you want to do that.
Oh yeah, that's cool. I want to ask you, like, your student, do some of them have the goal that they have to they want to make living out of it as well?
Yes, there's not many. I'm thinking there's two who have become professional comics. In general, that's not why they're doing it, though. They just, I mean, there are some who go on to, they do shows and they do open mics and stuff like that. But I think they're doing it for a different reason, because it's for themselves and also to educate the public, because it's a great way of educating the public, because here they are. First of all, there's a lot of public stigma around people who have mental illness. You know, people, oh, they're lazy or they're sick or they're crazy. And here you see someone with a label like schizophrenia. Like the best compliment I ever had was I heard these two guys talking after one of our shows, and they said, that guy with schizophrenia was hilarious. And how often do you hear the words hilarious and schizophrenia in the same sentence? So they see these people and they go, wow, these people are really cool. So so that's another reason that people take the courses, because they want to educate the public in a way that isn't, because, you know, I think sometimes when you educate them and you're too serious, it's like people just get really turned off. I mean, I've been to presentations where I go, you know, this is either it's really boring or this is so sad, I don't even want to hear any more about it. Whereas when you come to a comedy show, I think you can learn as much in a 5-minute set as you can in a 3-hour workshop, in the sense that comedy is insight, you know, so it brings these threads together. And I remember a friend of ours came to one of our shows, and one of the comics was doing a couple of minutes of her set was about having borderline personality. And our friend said, oh my God, that's me. I never realized. She got that in 2 minutes watching a comedian, whereas she might not have got that. You know, she could have been to therapy and read self-help books, and she might not have gotten that same insight, or if she did, it would have taken her way longer.
That's cool. What I want to ask you is, you are in a way limiting your what I would call it, your job, what you're doing with comedy, to people who are like in a way depressed, and you do comedy as therapy. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
more or less. Yeah.
I think there are another demand, because there is another comic I work with here, and she's trying. Her father was alcoholic, and
Mm,
her mom was working in alcoholic place for people with mental health and alcoholic.
mm.
So her father told her mom that she has nice legs, and her mom married him. So she is saying that when when she was young, like starting growing, she was alcoholic, and
Mm.
someone told her that she has nice legs, and she married him. And she is trying to work in that, as you said. Okay, this is the story, nice story.
Yeah,
Now, how to make it funny, how to make it
yeah,
representable in front of people. So
yeah.
I feel like you have more target than people who come to you or search comedy and mental health. Like I would talk with her about you, because you can make this kind of stories funny, and that's what she's saying.
Absolutely. And I consider, you know, a story like that, that's a mental health story to me, you know, in terms of, I mean, I think any addiction, and a lot of our people talk about their addictions too, that's part of mental health. And I think it even expands more than that, because for example, we have people in our class who are transgender, and gay, and they talk about their whole, you know, thing about, you know, coming out of the closet and all that stuff. And to me, that's a mental health issue, because that affects your mental health when you're marginalized and stigmatized like that. Also, we have people. So here in Canada, I mean, there's, you know, there's racism like there is everywhere else, but we have people who are Indigenous, like First Nations, you know, who were here, you know, before white people came and stole all their land.
Yeah.
And we've had some of them in the class, and they have a lot to say about what it's like to be them in this world, and you know what they face, and the poverty and the racism. And to me, that's a mental health issue.
Trust me, I think that the way the people are getting the information makes so much big sense on their react to it, and how many people will come to you.
Yeah.
Because even me now, before we start this podcast, when you told me you do like for people with mental health comedy, I didn't imagine it's this much, and it's
Right.
and now I even include myself that I need it.
Right. And I mean, you talk, for example, you talk about coming from Yemen, where things are very regimented and they tell you what to do. And essentially, um, I think in those situations, often people don't get to be themselves. And when you don't get to be yourself, that becomes a mental health issue because it affects your mental health. It's bad for you. Like, for example, I think what's changed here in North America is that back in the olden days, it's like your parents told you what you were going to do. I'm a shoemaker, so you're going to be a shoemaker, and there's no choice. And that's really bad for some. I mean, unless you want to become a shoemaker, it's really bad for your mental health because it affects your whole personality. Whereas now, for example, with our kids, our job was more to facilitate, and basically, okay, so, what do you want to do? And let's figure out how we can make that happen. As opposed to Jonathan, I want you to be I mean, it was kind of funny because my son, Jonathan, he's 23 now, but when he was 5, he came to me and he said, Dad, I want to do stand-up comedy with you. So I was like, really? Okay. So we wrote an act. And it was really cute because at first he was too small, so he had to stand on a chair when he did his act. And he ended up doing some material about what it was like to have a dad with a mental illness. And so he came and he did a lot of stand up for mental health shows with us. We went on the road together and it was really cool. And then when he got to be about 13 or 14, he decided he didn't want to do stand up anymore. And it's like, okay, no problem. Whereas I think it would be really damaging if I said, no, Jonathan, you have to keep doing stand-up comedy. I've put all this work into you and there's no way you can quit now. I mean, and that would, once again, that would be a mental health issue for him because it would really damage who he was mentally.
It freaks me out. It makes me, when people have kids and they have no idea what does it mean to cause your kid brain damage or to force things on your kids, and people are just bombing kids. Like I have my joke where like my dad doesn't have a job, and Yemen is destroyed.
Yeah,
And
I know. It's a war zone.
And they have 2 new kids in the last year.
Wow.
2 years. Two new kids, and like my dad has no idea with humans brain or it's just crazy. And the problem is these 2 kids will grow and grow up, and then they will be very disaster for the world and for humans unless something happen and change their directions. And then that's why there is suffering. There is, as you said, Yemen is war zone. Because I say in my joke that we shouldn't ask the people to help the Yemen in the war zone. The solution is within. We should ask my dad to stop having sex. And that's and that's
funny.
That's the solution. We have it. And it's just crazy for me.
Well, I think too, what happens when you force kids and you tell them what they have to do and what they have to believe and all that kind of stuff. I think that depending on their personality, some kids end up going into the world really angry and they don't understand why they're angry, but they're angry all the time. And they're really like, anytime someone tries to tell them something, they get really angry at that person, or they have to push all those feelings down and they end up having really low self-esteem, and they're afraid to say anything because they're afraid that anywhere they go, someone's going to judge them and tell them that they're wrong. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different mental health issues that can arise, once again, depending on someone's personality traits. And I think, in therapy, I mean, one of the things that I've worked with a lot with people who come from dysfunctional families is, for example, there's the classic sort of, say, woman who grows up with an alcoholic father, and then goes out in the world and meets another alcoholic and goes, oh, wow, I must love this person because he reminds me of my dad. And inside of her, she thought that the feeling she got around her dad was love, when it was actually
Yeah.
this guy was an alcoholic and he was incapable of loving her. So she goes out and she has relationships with men, and then she doesn't understand why they're not working. And through therapy, she starts to understand, oh, okay, so because of the home I came from, I got my wires crossed. I thought this feeling was love, when the feeling is actually, don't go anywhere near this guy, get the hell out. And I think that that's something that people learn in therapy, but they also get it through doing comedy about that, because they kind of get to the point where, oh, okay, so I've made all these mistakes in my life, and there's actually there's a lot of humor in this tragedy. That I would go into because I've had women, and this is just an example. It can be men, it can be whatever. But I've had them sort of joke, they say, I can go into a room and I will like full of men, and I will find the one alcoholic. Like, it's like I have this perfect radar. I will find that one alcoholic who can't love me in that room, and I will fall in love with that person. And
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
that's kind of, but it's kind of funny. And I think when you're able to laugh at it, it really helps you generate some insight, because the next time you're in that room with that's full of those guys, and you start to get attracted to the alcoholic, you go, oh, wait a second, right, I've already written a joke about this. I don't need to do it again.
That's cool. And what I like about your students, they actually have very important message for the world
Absolutely.
when they come through, and
Absolutely.
it's like a mission for them, because
Yep.
the audience, they might change someone's life, and if they do it the right way, if they put the
Yep.
energy, many people will that they cannot bring things out to the surface, and they have things inside them. When they see someone saying that my husband was alcoholic, and as you said, in a joke way, that's the
Yep.
best way. So that's why
Yep.
I'm really grateful that you are participating in this way. You are helping these people, and then what they do for others is just something so beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah, and so you asked me, what are my comedy goals? So I don't really have, like, I know a lot of the folks, that we meet at that open mic that we do, they want to go on and they want to have, become headliners and go on the road and get their own HBO special and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I want to work on my material and have really good material, but I don't have those kinds of goals. Like, I don't want to, go on the road and do, tons of comedy clubs and, try and get, that's just not what I want to do. And so I think I'm different from a lot of comics, because yeah, they have those specific goals. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's different for me.
Yeah, and also it's nice when, even if you didn't come from dysfunctional family, it's nice to know. So you are aware of people actions or what they do, so you don't take things personal. When you see someone crossing your line or anything, you're not gonna go and end up fighting or
Yep.
trying to kill the person. You just know that there are people who just like, do you think that's they are being unlucky? Do you think life is unfair game, bad cards?
Absolutely. Life is totally unfair. It's funny because I have this conversation with my wife, because I mean, we are not a religious family. And what I notice about a lot of religions is they basically say, if you pray and you do the right thing, then good things will happen to you. And that's not true at all. I mean, really shitty things happen to really good people, and really good things happen to really bad people. And there's no, I mean, my mom says, she says, it's an indifferent universe. And that's what I personally believe. It's like, I could get cancer tomorrow and die. And it's not, I haven't done anything wrong. It's just shit like that happens to people. People like, we have a friend who, just got diagnosed, and like, she hasn't done anything wrong. she doesn't deserve it. So it's, and I think with that sort of, it's an indifferent universe. So people cope, some of them cope by believing that, okay, so if I pray to God and I do what God says, everything will be fine. I think humor is, to me, a really healthy way of coping with that indifferent universe, because we don't have control over it. But if we're able to laugh at it, at least we're able to make ourselves feel good. And I think sometimes that's, that's the best we can do. And even, let's say you're able, you go visit that friend with cancer and you're able to help that person have a couple laughs. You've made a huge difference in their day.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. I really just want to tell you that I would never get enough talking to you for 1 or 2 or even 10 hours, but we always have limit, and
Yeah.
I ask you for this 1 hour, so you might have other things to do. I would just to really thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I'm really doing this podcast first of all for myself. That's like, this 1 hour I spend with you is huge, and it's really amazing for me to have the opportunity. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure we'll see you at that open mic, hopefully.
And I'm going tonight as well.
Great. So am I. So I'll see you tonight.
You need to register.
Yeah, I've already, I've registered. Yeah.
That's cool. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.